Hi, I'm Mary Chandler, and I'm the chair of the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee. Thank you for being here today to discuss the Progress Committee's work on racial equity and policing in Indianapolis. For more than 55 years, the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee has convened representatives of all sectors of the community to address the most significant issues of concern and areas of opportunity related to the progress of Indianapolis. The circumstances surrounding the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis in the spring of 2020 and the grim awakening to the hardship over so many years experienced by Black people who encounter our criminal justice system made clear that police reform is one such significant issue of concern and opportunity for the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee. So, in the summer of 2020, GIPC convened a team of lawyers and law students to research, benchmark, and make recommendations of the most critical municipal and police reforms our city should consider. This team completed its work in early 2021, compiling recommendations in a paper entitled Police Reform, Equal Treatment of Black Americans, which was released by GIPC on February 3rd, 2021. The recommendations of this team are just a starting point to the essential, and we acknowledge, controversial conversations surrounding community policing in Indianapolis. We must confront and debate with respect provocative and challenging issues such as police reform if we are to achieve an equitable and just city. Today, we will discuss the police reform report and recommendations. We're very grateful to this team and others who participated for their thoughtful work and commitment to this community conversation. With us today are Karen Bravo, Dean of the IU McKinney School of Law and Chair of the Reform Team, John Gaydu, Assistant General Counsel of Cummins, Inc., who co-led the team, Joe Smith Jr., a partner at Faegre Drinker, also co-lead of the team with John Gaydu, Cummins employee and attorney Laurel Jenkins, who acted as the lead researcher, and Jordan Oliver, a law student at McKinney School of Law, who was the research assistant. I'd like to take this time to thank the entire team for their hard and thoughtful work, and thank you for your interest in this important issue in the advancement of Indianapolis.
Well, thank you, Mary, for your introductory remarks. My name is Beth White, and I am the Executive Director of the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee. GIPC is the name that we are known by, and GIPC has been working on this effort now for a number of months. And so I'm going to moderate a discussion today with the leaders of the effort for the structural reform team and the work that's been done. So let's start with Dean Karen Bravo of the McKinney School of Law here in Indianapolis. Dean Bravo, thanks for being with us this afternoon. I want to start by asking you why you thought this was an important effort and why you agreed to lead the effort in this way.
Well, thank you, Beth, and greetings, everyone. I first also want to say thank you for inviting me to be a part of this effort, giving me an opportunity to engage in this issue. So as to why, I will give you some names: George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. The ubiquity of cell phones and video evidence has created a popular awakening to the abuses that have been suffered by Black Americans and members of other minoritized groups throughout the years. And so police reform is one aspect of a very long struggle for equality, that Blacks be treated like other citizens with dignity, with respect, and without abuse of power. It is beneficial for all of us. We will each have greater safety when all of us are treated fairly, when all of us feel safe in our interactions with the police, with law enforcement, and so that we are able to contribute to the greater safety of our entire community. So being able to participate has been a real privilege for me.
So, based on the work that was done by a number of people, many of whom we're going to hear from in just a minute, did the final report meet your expectations about what you had hoped the work would produce?
Yes, I had hoped that we would be able to contribute to the conversation which was taking place not only in our state, but nationally and also internationally about the subordination of some groups and conversations that had focused on police brutality. But of course, there are other broader issues that come with systemic racism. I was really pleased with the way in which this team was able to use the tools of legal analysis and research in order to address these issues of systemic racism. I was especially pleased that this was a document and an effort that focused on systems, on structures, on the ways in which they have been built and sustained, and that they continue to sustain inequities so that there is no attack on any particular person or individual, but an understanding of the ways in which the structures of our society over long years have been built to foster this subordination and inequity.
So, as dean of the law school, we were very intentional in involving your students there in the work. So, I'm interested in knowing your perspective on why it's important, even at the stage of being a law student, that getting involved in a project like this is important.
Thanks for that question. Well, as you know, experiential learning is a strength of the McKinney School of Law, as is commitment to pro bono. So at the time that I became involved, I immediately thought of the opportunity for our students, opportunity that gives them the chance to look at these issues outside of the classroom. It's all very well to sit in the classroom, to discuss the theories, to discuss the policies, but having the opportunity to engage with this great team of lawyers as they did their analysis and to understand that you could contribute through your insights, through your research, to real world issues that were so pressing. And I hope that that's what our students have learned from this, to be able to transmute their passion for change by using the skills that they're learning in law school and apply it to a real opportunity to enter the conversation and to influence reform in our country and in our community.
Well, speaking of reform in our community, as a leader, both academically and in the legal profession here in Indianapolis, how hopeful are you that you feel like there might be real change, not just from the effort that you've been a part of, but from all of the discussions that are going on right now?
That's exactly the key, Beth. The fact that there are discussions going on all over. I am so thrilled. I go to legal academia, I speak among faculty, among deans in higher ed, your group, groups where businesses are committing to make change. And hopefully I'm not fooling myself, but I really do think that that conversation has been opened in a different way. It's as if scales have been lifted from eyes. And so I am really hopeful that the reawakening, the concern, the passion will then be channeled usefully so that there is dialogue and conversation and understanding and addressing systems together. Because at the end of the day, we all want to live in safe communities. We all want to be respected, and we want to be together as a community of equals. And I think this has been a real opportunity for us all. And if we're able to use that passion and that reawakening and really channel it in the right way, there will be reform. And so far, the signs really do point to an inflection point.
Thank you for that. So let's take what you just said and talk about the community in particular. I'm going to focus our next discussion here with Joe Smith Jr., who is, as we know, a partner at Fagery Drinker. Joe, your main contribution to the effort, as I remember it, is really getting community input. And so I'm interested to know from you how you went about doing that and why you thought it was important and what you perhaps learned from that effort.
Yeah, I think it was vital to get community input. We will admit that, it's kind of sometimes difficult to get as much as you want. Time and everyone's availability in this new pandemic arena did not lend itself to making it very easy. But what we attempted to do was to reach out to community leaders, including organizations across central Indiana that are influential. We also were provided names of academia and professors that are well known in this arena across the country, and also interface with the faith-based community. The attempt for all these different aspects was to glean from them their views, their grassroots assessments of police and the relationships they have with their community. By being involved in Zoom meetings themselves, reaching out via emails and or letters to folks, and taking part in other Zoom meeting groups as we have within GIPC itself. And what we're able to learn is that there is a disconnect from a lot as far as community folks and the trust level that they have with the police in their community. And that was like one of the, I think, cornerstones is just having that, what we say, transparency and creating better work ethics between the community and the officers themselves. There's a lot more work that can be done. I think we were satisfied as a group with the responses we received, but they were on the minimal side as opposed to on the very large side, which would have been a more robust fulfillment of what we sought out to do.
So, Joe, I know that you've been a member of this community for, I think, your whole life. I know your dad and your sister and your whole family. And so I'd ask you, just from your perspective as a person of color and a high-profile professional, did what you learn sort of align with your own life experience here in Indianapolis?
It absolutely did. It's a little overwhelming to revisit your youth and your life, but it's interesting as we talk about the civil unrest that's going across the country and privilege and not, is that sitting as a partner at a major law firm does not exempt you from those issues that confront us as Black men. And I was interested, John and I served as co-chairs, and we both could bring back stories and examples of our interfacing with police in our respective areas of growth and rearing. It's unfortunate, but it's part of our existence in our life. I think it makes us who we are today. It creates the ability for us to digest the truth behind what's going on in discussions and get a true face to it that's not just a stereotypical face. It's one that, as society would think, was privileged and advanced, but we have encountered the same struggles as those that you've seen on TV across our nation.
Right. Thank you for that personal perspective. I think it's important for us to hear. So, John, Joe did a nice handoff to you, so I'm going to pick that up and bring it to you. Tell me about, we're going to talk in a minute about the research methods and the kind of the academic piece of it, but tell me personally what it was like to dig into these issues as a person of color and a high-profile professional in the city.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, it was really, I think it was a culmination of a few different things. As a Black man in America, I think that this has been an issue that has been top of mind for me for quite some time, really as far back as I can remember. And I remember after the George Floyd killing last year, I remember thinking to myself, I am tired of being frustrated. I am tired of being angry. And I wanted to really channel that energy into doing something productive, right, to prevent these things from happening again. And to me, the big difference was the response in the community. I was really surprised, pleasantly surprised, that when you saw the crowds out there protesting, it wasn't just Black people. There were white people, brown people, people from all over, and even internationally it got attention. And so for me to be able to participate in an initiative like this, it's really just been so invigorating. It's renewed my hope in the possibility of change, and then to be directly involved in it has really just given me a sense of purpose. And this work, every meeting, it wasn't like work. You know, every meeting you look forward to it, you go, you talk about the issues, and to feel like you're getting a really front seat view of the change that's happening is, I'm just so thankful for it. So this has been great for me. It's been enlightening. It's been encouraging, and I really appreciate the opportunity that I've had to work with all these great folks.
Great. So let's talk about it, and that's the work. Tell me, just kind of unpack a little bit, if you would, your methods, your efforts. You know, what the thing about this issue is there's an awful lot, right? So you could spend years and write books, which we didn't have time to do. And so, how did you focus in, and how did you marshal the resources of the smart lawyers that you had working with you?
Right, right. So you're correct. There's so much that you could do in this space. And so what we wanted to do is, we knew that we couldn't boil the ocean. We wanted to come up with practical, sustainable solutions. And we also knew that we needed to get smart on these issues as well. And so we spent a lot of time in the beginning really trying to get a good sense of the landscape, right? And so even though this particular report was focused on the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, we did national research. And so we got some law students to help us. We couldn't have done it without them. We have one, Jordan, who's here with us today. We got some law students to help us, and we identified a few broad categories of police reform work. And we really dug in and did some in-depth research. Once we had that, we had to funnel it down into something workable. And so we used different tools. You know, being a Cummins employee myself and being around a lot of engineers, we believe in Six Sigma. And so we use some Six Sigma tools, actually some tools that are used typically for process improvement and gaining efficiencies. But they also help to really kind of narrow down and get to root causes. And we use some of those tools to identify those primary focus areas and hone in on the issues that we really wanted to focus on. And so from there, we went and we came up with some reform principles, because again, we wanted to make sure that we stayed focused and really had practical, sustainable solutions to offer. And so we came up with five reform principles. And based on those principles, we looked at the various initiatives that are ongoing across the nation in police reform, and we ranked those initiatives into buckets. And so what you'll see in the report is a really good, extensive list of the initiatives rather that we believe will most impact reforming police policies and practices. And so at a high level, that's how we went about the work.
And so tell me about conflicts that might have arisen in the context of your recommendations. The report is couched in terms of recommendations, you know, for the discussion and for policymakers, local, state, and potentially nationally. Were there conflicts? And if so, how were those navigated?
Of course, everyone is passionate about these issues. These are important issues. And so what we did was, when we finished our research portion of the process, we just held regular meetings and we had conversations about what we found and what we learned. And we would go through the initiatives that we thought most impacted certain principles. And we just had good old fashioned discussion and debate, right? We did have the help of some tools. I mentioned some Six Sigma tools that helped us kind of really objectively assess the extent to which certain initiatives would impact or drive improvement with regard to some of those principles. And we just went through it. And it really, I think it was really a good discussion that we had, using that tool to help us rank the initiatives and really understand how they were impacting the principles. I think increased the potential for our group to have alignment, because when you had an opinion in there, you had to be able to back it up with a concrete explanation or a reference to research. And so I think we really just had good old fashioned discussion and debate based on facts, and it got us a pretty good result.
Great, wonderful. Well, speaking of a good result, I'm going to move on to Laurel, who has been participating as well. Laurel Jenkins, an executive at Cummins, also a lawyer and a former public servant here in the City County building as chief counsel to the prosecutor. So Laurel has more than a passing understanding of these issues in the real world. So Laurel, tell me about your time with the work. It's a bit of a departure of what you're doing today, but it did, I think, bring you back to some of the issues that you were focusing on in your previous position.
Yes, thanks. And thanks for having all of us today. when I heard about the opportunity to help coordinate the research portion of this, I really jumped at the chance. I certainly have a personal passion about this, and being able to use my previous experience as a lawyer in the public sector, it was a really, it just felt like something I really needed to do. And so I was privileged to coordinate the lawyers at Cummins, and then also up and coming legal minds with the law students at McKinney Law School. And over the course of several weeks, we were able to, as John mentioned, focus on some strategic reform principles. So accountability, transparency, community policing, national policing standards, and strategic fund allocation. And we paired those up against all the various issues that could be tackled within the police reform space, and really wanted to use this report to focus the conversation on the areas that had the biggest impact on the community, and also serve as the catalyst for conversation between law enforcement, local leaders, and the community.
So, Laurel, I want to ask you about the challenge in this area between police officers and others in law enforcement feeling like they're under attack. I know as a prosecutor, you and I used to be a prosecutor myself a long time ago, you interact a lot with police officers. And tell me how you viewed the work you were doing in the context of the people who would be hearing it, in particular members of law enforcement.
Sure. Ultimately, this report is not designed to be a outright attack on law enforcement or people that are public servants. It's absolutely meant to be a jumping off point to spark conversation in order to improve the safety of Indianapolis residents and the relationships that they have with law enforcement.
All right. So we talked a lot about the law students who were involved, and I think it's wonderful to have young, energetic, and up and coming legal professionals. The rest of us on this call are not new legal professionals, have been at this a while. So Jordan, we're going to come to you. Jordan Oliver is a law student preparing to graduate from the McKinney School of Law. So Jordan, first of all, congratulations. Tell me about your experience. What did you work on? How did you find the collaboration, and what did you learn?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you guys today. The way that I found this collaboration was the school often sends out, we have this program called Simplicity, where they send out pro bono opportunities or opportunities during the summer. And I saw this pro bono opportunity come across not too long after George Floyd, and I definitely wanted to jump at that opportunity. Once I got picked, then as the others were saying, the students got divided into the different groups, and I was in the strategic funding group. And we just focused on ways that the way that I approached it was to go look at how other police departments that have been successful, how they've allocated their funds, and compare that to how IMPD did theirs. So
what, can you give us an example of a place that might be doing this in a more effective way than IMPD, for instance?
Yes, one of the cities that we found was the Milwaukee Police Department, and they had spent more of their money on a proactive approach rather than reactive, meaning they were spending more on the preventative measures rather than just hiring more police officers to address issues that have already happened.
And did you feel like that's a better approach?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me, Jordan, what your plans are after law school.
After law school, I have the bar exam coming up this summer,
Yes.
which should be very interesting. We don't know if it's going to be remote or not. But
right.
After the bar, I'll be joining Barnes and Thornburg in their litigation department.
Oh, congratulations. I assume you worked with other students. Do you have any perspective about the experience that they had? Did they find it meaningful or useful?
Yes, I think that a lot of the other students enjoyed it because it was their first opportunity to do so. I think I was the only 3L that participated. I think most of the other students were 1 or 2Ls.
Okay. And for those who aren't law students or lawyers, that means 3L meaning in third year of law school. So 1L being a first year of law school. So, well, that's great. So good luck to you. That's wonderful. So we're going to conclude our discussion in just a minute, and we're going to go around the kind of metaphorical table that we don't have since we're not in the same room. And I'm going to ask each of you, if there were one single reform that you think would make the most impact, what would it be and why? But I do want to say that at the conclusion of our discussion today, a link to the report will be on the screen. It is on the website of the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee, which is indygipc.org. But the link will be on the screen for you so that you can find that link and go ahead and read the report. It is extremely well done, but not too long. So that's a combination I think is really useful. So I'm going to go reverse order. Jordan, I'm going to put you on the spot first. If there were a single reform that you feel like would make the most impact in the ability for everyone in the community, our community in particular, to feel respected and treated equitably by law enforcement, what would that reform be?
I think maybe adding, my answer is going to go towards more of a perspective. To be able to have diverse people at the table to bring that perspective. I think oftentimes the people at the table, maybe to no fault of their own, that it's hard for them to understand the perspective of people that are struggling in the community because they haven't faced those experiences themselves. So I think by having people at the table that can understand and maybe teach people that maybe aren't aware of those situations, I think that would help a lot. Great.
Laurel?
I would say prioritizing training of de-escalation tactics over use of force.
Okay. John, what's your answer?
I'd have to go with increasing civilian oversight. Generally, I think if you do that, it hits a lot of our reform principles. If you think about accountability, transparency, community policing. So I think that at the end of the day, the police work for the community and there's really a partnership. And so I think the more involved civilians can get in the development of the policies and practices that really govern policing, I think the better the result is for everyone.
All right, great. Joe?
I think everybody's like covered most of them, not be repetitive, but also, I mean, what I would pull out of John's is the key is transparency and in all aspects. And it means from inclusion of folks, as John talked about, which was very profound here in Indianapolis with the new approach with the general orders and being more inclusive. I think that was paramount, but also in the authenticity and transparency of the disciplinary actions against those that we trust to protect and provide. And that's what I would twist on the transparency aspect.
Great. Dean Bravo, I'm going to let you back clean up on this question.
So I think I'm in the hardest position because everyone's given the great answers. So I'm going to cheat and say combine these wonderful ideas. The training for implicit bias and de-escalation, really important for the day-to-day. Then transparency and accountability when something does go wrong so that it can be addressed openly and dealt with. Diversity, having multiple perspectives at the table so we can understand and foster that communication. And of course, let's not forget the great points that were made in the report about funding priorities, funding prevention as opposed to attempting to cure. So I've cheated. I'm going to endorse the recommendations. It's short, to the point, and it really, they are networked together and codependent on each other to lead Indianapolis to a stronger police department, a stronger relationship with the community where everyone is treated equally and we all feel safe.
Wonderful. Well, I should mention that just last week, Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department announced that they are putting into place, implementing anti-racism training for their department. They're starting with recruits. They're going to do the curriculum that Child Advocates has created, Undoing Racism. And it's really meaningful, and they're working on trying to figure out how to implement it for the entire department. And for those of us who've been through it, and I know that's probably most of you on the call, it is extremely impactful. So I think the good news is that our department is forward thinking in some of the recommendations and other things that are coming out of this conversation, not just our conversation today, but the conversation our community has been having really since, well, for a number of years, but coming to a head really after the summer of 2020. So I want to thank all of you, not only for being with me this today so that we can have this conversation, but for the work that you did to create the report. It is really important. It's an important piece of the conversation. It's not the only conversation that is happening in Indianapolis, but the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee is indebted to you for your energy, your time, and your expertise in creating the report. So again, the link to the report will be on the screen for those watching and listening. And I want to thank all of you again for the conversation. And let's look forward to a more equitable community for everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you.